So imagine this. You're Netflix. You've just signed a multi-million-dollar content deal with Meghan Markle, thinking you've landed the jackpot, the royal drama, the fan base, the glitz. You're expecting something powerful, raw, and unfiltered that'll rake in global attention and subscriptions. What you end up with, a PR disaster so big even Netflix's own execs are citing their own judgment. It all started with a project called With Love Meghan. It was supposed to be a behind-the-scenes look into Meghan's post-royal life, the philanthropy, the struggles, the strength. But the deeper Netflix got into production, the more the illusions started cracking. What was pitched as a documentary slowly started looking more like a scripted show disguised as a truth. The first major red flag, a scene where Meghan is seen reading to kids at a literacy center. Sweet, right? Except those weren't random children from the community. They were hired child actors. The volunteers helping out, her own personal staff dressed up to look like locals. Donations returned right after filming. It was all staged. Every single detail was choreographed for the camera, including the angle of the light and the fake laughter in the background. And when that info leaked, Netflix higher-ups went into panic mode. Executives were furious, not just because they got duped, but because this violated every basic rule of documentary ethics. They weren't funding a Hallmark drama. They thought they were capturing real stories. Instead, they were being handed something that felt plastic, polished, and completely manufactured. And that wasn't the only problem. Things got legal real fast. Meghan had allegedly written a segment accusing a senior royal of emotional abuse during her pregnancy. It was meant to be one of the most heartbreaking parts of the season. But here's the thing. There were no documents, no confirmations, no witnesses, just her word. Netflix's legal team reviewed it and basically said, absolutely not. The segment was flagged as defamatory and was pulled before it could trigger a full-on legal war with Buckingham Palace. But by then, the trust was already broken. Internally, the vibe on set was reportedly a nightmare. Crew members, editors, assistants. They started leaking stories anonym, and the picture they painted wasn't pretty. Meghan was described as micromanaging every shot, rewriting scenes at the last minute, and shutting down any pushback. One editor said Meghan demanded that footage be cut if it didn't make her look powerful and graceful. If someone challenged that, they were out. Simple as that. The production environment got so toxic that Netflix had to bring in conflict resolution specialists just to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. Morale was in the basement. Staff started quitting. Some even refused to return for a second season, calling the entire project a royal ego trip rather than an actual documentary. Then came the emotional bombshell, or what looked like one. There's a scene where Meghan is holding one of Archie's toys and quietly crying in her living room. It's soft, touching, and looks completely real, except it wasn't. The audio of her weeping added in post-production. She never actually cried. The lighting was adjusted digitally. The entire moment was engineered to make viewers feel something that didn't actually happen. One editor even admitted that scenes like that were routine. Emotion wasn't captured. It was manufactured. Netflix realized they didn't have a raw docu-series. They had a reality show playing dress-up, and that hit them hard. The kind of betrayal that makes you start scrubbing your hands and wondering what else you missed. This wasn't just about one bad show. This was about damage to their entire brand. And Meghan, she had officially become a reputational risk. Viewer response made everything worse. When With Love Meghan dropped on Netflix, there was curiosity, no doubt. The name Markle still carried weight. But by the time episode 3 rolled around, interest had tanked. Viewer retention plummeted by over 60%. People weren't just bored, they were irritated. Social media lit up with comments calling the show fake, overly polished, and emotionally manipulative. Even fans who once defended Meghan started to distance themselves, frustrated by how forced everything felt. Netflix's algorithm doesn't lie. Executives watched in real time as audiences dropped off mid-episode, often during the parts meant to tug at heartstrings. One critic online said it best. This isn't a docu-series. It's a performance piece starring Meghan as her own misunderstood idol. For a platform built on binge-worthy content, this was a death sentence. The data didn't just show disinterest. It screamed embarrassment. Then came the internal fallout. A leaked memo from Netflix's top brass started making the rounds. It was blunt, direct, and borderline brutal. "We can no longer treat Meghan Markle as an asset," it read. "She is a reputational liability. Her content lacks credibility, and the backlash is damaging. Brand trust." This wasn't a mild course correction. This was a company admitting it had made a massive mistake. The memo didn't stop there. It reportedly recommended halting all future productions involving Meghan, advising legal teams to comb through every second of footage to avoid defamation claims. The word inside Netflix was that the Meghan experiment had officially backfired. And worse, the risk wasn't just financial, it was legal. One of the biggest red flags came from footage featuring Meghan's children, Archie and Lee. These were marketed as intimate, personal moments, a rare peek into royal family life beyond the palace walls. But when the legal team began digging, they found gaps. No release forms from filming locations, no third-party confirmations, and in some cases, no way to verify if the children in the footage were even the real kids. That triggered a full-blown compliance panic. Was Meghan using stand-ins? Were these scenes staged too? In an industry where child protection laws are ironclad, that kind of sloppiness is dangerous. Certain scenes were pulled immediately, and lawyers demanded that all future appearances of the children be reviewed under strict guidelines. What was meant to be heartwarming had turned into a legal landmine. What stung the most was who refused to be part of the project. In early development, the plan was to bring out the big names. Oprah, Serena Williams, Tyler Perry, even Michelle Obama. Those connections were supposed to add weight and star power. But one by one, they backed out. Some said nothing. Others cited creative differences. Behind closed doors, it was clear nobody wanted to attach their brand to a show that felt more like a PR stunt than a truthful production. Word started to spread in Hollywood that Meghan was difficult to work with, not just demanding, but unpredictable. Producers said she overruled scripts, rewrote episodes mid-shoot, and fired back at any attempt to rein her in. One person described the process as a documentary by dictatorship. It didn't matter how experienced the team was. Meghan ran the show, and if she didn't like the direction, she changed it. Full stop. Executives now admit they gave her too much control. What they envisioned as a powerful collaboration turned into a one-woman crusade for image crafting. And the price, it wasn't just millions of dollars. It was Netflix's credibility on the line. The final blow came from within Meghan's own editing room. Post-production staff began noticing a disturbing pattern. Emotional manipulation wasn't just sprinkled in, it was baked into the core of the series. Editors admitted that multiple scenes were enhanced with artificial lighting, background scores, and even added voiceovers to manufacture drama where there was none. Editing took place beyond any concept of the 90s episodes. Project after project employed editors. Moments that were dull or unremarkable were dressed up like Oscar-worthy segments. It wasn't storytelling. It was stagecraft. The most egregious example involved a now infamous clip of Meghan sitting quietly with one of Archie's toys, supposedly crying over pressures of motherhood. But raw footage revealed a very different reality. Meghan never cried. She didn't even look sad. The lighting was neutral, the room silent. Every emotional beat in that scene had been created in post. Fake tears, soft music, and a gentle voice over time perfectly with her facial expression. It was a performance stitched together in the editing bay. Netflix staff felt duped. What was supposed to be a vulnerable, honest account of Meghan's life had become a carefully curated fiction. One editor said, "We weren't documenting her journey. We were fabricating one." But the most damaging revelation of all, some of Meghan's most heartfelt monologues were allegedly plagiarized. One particularly emotional story she told involving racial profiling at a grocery store matched a viral Reddit post from 2017 word for word down to the smallest detail. It wasn't just a coincidence. Internet sleuths and Reddit users caught on fast, posting side-by-side comparisons that exposed the overlap. Meghan had presented it as her own lived experience. Viewers were stunned. This led fact-checkers to start digging into the rest of the script. They found other examples, stories, quotes, even entire metaphors lifted from online posts and articles. Meghan, it seemed, had woven other people's pain into her narrative and presented it as her truth. For a platform like Netflix that prides itself on original storytelling, this crossed a line. They weren't just embarrassed, they felt deceived. It wasn't just Meghan's public image taking the hit. Internally, Netflix was bleeding. Subscriptions had dipped by over 200,000 during the quarter that With Love Meghan aired. Viewer trust dropped. Even longtime Netflix loyalists were questioning the platform's standards. Shareholders raised concerns. Executives were forced to explain how a company this big with so many layers of review had allowed something so messy to happen on their watch. And Meghan, her brand was now radioactive. Sponsors distanced themselves. Celebrity friends went quiet. Public sentiment shifted from support to mockery. Even the tabloids who once chased her every move now treated her like a punchline. She had become what Hollywood fears the most. Not irrelevant, but exhausting. Behind the scenes, Netflix began pulling back. Legal teams went into overdrive, scrubbing content, drafting waivers, preparing for potential lawsuits. Internally, the word was clear. Meghan Markle was no longer a partner. She was a liability, a risk not worth taking. Her once bright content empire meant to rival Oprah and carve her a new lane of influence was crumbling under the weight of its own deception. From inflated narratives to doctored emotion, the illusion had shattered. The cameras were still rolling, but the audience had already walked out. Netflix didn't just cancel With Love Meghan to cut costs. They cut it to cut ties quietly, decisively, and with finality. No press releases, no spin, just a buried project and a silent exit. What was once meant to be her Hollywood redemption arc had turned into a cautionary tale. Meghan bet big on controlling the narrative, but the truth, messy, unpolished, and unfiltered, always finds a way to break through.